Puritans came to the New World in search of religious freedom. They had been being persecuted in England prior to their arrival, and they decided to look for a new place to live. Now, unlike the Pilgrims, the Puritans believed that the Anglican Church could be saved, that it just needed to be purified, hence the name Puritans. Between 1630 and 1640, over 20,000 Puritans came to the New World and settled in the Boston area. This was known as the Great Migration. As these Puritans came, they brought with them ideas of being very conservative. They were kind of very settled into the town. They were very set in their ways. They established laws that were often linked to their religion or linked to their church. Some of the laws that they had passed were that everybody was required to go to church on Sundays. People were not allowed to swear. They were to dress in plain clothes, and whenever they didn't follow these rules, they were often publicly humiliated, as seen here in this picture of the people who were put in stocks. Puritans were very hard workers. It's no surprise that their colony flourished because they had a very strong work ethic. They believed that hard work led to godliness. So they had worked very hard, long days, and took very little vacation. But that didn't mean that there weren't people who disagreed with them. There were lots of people who didn't. As we get into the 1640s and the colonies get bigger, they continue to expand. They begin to encroach on Indian territory, and some people had differing opinions about how to deal with the natives, as we'll see when we get to Roger Williams and Rhode Island. One of those people who disagreed with the Puritans was Thomas Hooker. Thomas Hooker was a pastor in a Puritan church, and he had some problems with some issues with how rigid society was in Boston. So he left Boston and established his own colony near the Connecticut River, and he named his colony Connecticut. Now, when Thomas Hooker got there and established his colony, one of the very first things that happens is he passes what's known as the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut. That's in 1639. In effect, these laws were kind of like a constitution. They provided people with voting rights, including non-church members, and they limited the power of the government. This expanded the representative government, the people that it expanded the power that the people had to elect their own representatives and feel like they had some say in the government. So this was very, very important. It's kind of a precursor to our Constitution. As I mentioned, Roger Williams was somebody who had an issue at the church in Boston. He opposed the forced attendance in church. He didn't believe that people should be forced to come to church on Sundays. He also opposed how the Puritans and the Separatists were taking native lands by force. The Native Americans didn't really understand land ownership rights, and they were often taken advantage of or just simply pushed off of their land. Roger Williams disagreed with that policy, so he headed south and established a colony in Rhode Island. His colony was kind of based on the foundation, as they start to pass laws there, it was based on the foundation that religion and the government should be separate. Today we call this the separation of church and state. Those ideas, in America at least, got their roots there in Rhode Island and with Roger Williams. We mentioned this before in class, but in Pennsylvania there was another group of people who were seeking religious freedom, and those were the Quakers, or the Society of Friends as they preferred to be called back then. The Society of Friends were pacifists. They were a Protestant group that had been persecuted in England. They came to America under the guidance of William Penn. He was owed some money. His family was owed money. from the King of England, and in repayment of that debt, he received a tract of land in Pennsylvania. William Penn did two things in Pennsylvania. Number one, he provided religious freedom for everybody, to anybody. You could practice whatever religion you wanted in Pennsylvania. And the second thing that William Penn did was he treated Native Americans like brothers. Um, the native, as I said, they didn't understand land ownership and things like that. William Penn did purchase land from Native Americans, but he gave them fair value for that land. And that he was one of the few colonists who treated them that way. They had a very good relationship in Pennsylvania in the early days with the Native Americans, and a good relationship with all of the different religious groups that were in there. There were a lot of people who were attracted, wanted to come to Pennsylvania and live here. So we had craftspeople from Germany, we had craftspeople from Sweden, from all over Europe who came and they set up businesses here, blacksmiths and clockmakers and all different types of industries, as well as a large farming population who settled in what was known the breadbasket state. Pennsylvania, because of his policies, Pennsylvania becomes one of the wealthiest of the 13 English colonies. Maryland is another colony, the last colony that was kind of established, not necessarily last in order, but last that we're going to speak about, that was established for religious purposes. Maryland was a colony that was founded by George and Cecil Calvert. George Calvert was given the original land grant, but he didn't live to make it to America in order to see his colony play out. It was his son, Cecil Calvert, who established the colony of Maryland, named after Queen Mary, who was the last Catholic queen of the time in England. This colony was promised to be a safe haven for Catholics. They promised religious freedom as long as you were a Christian. In 1649, they put the first laws on the books that guaranteed religious freedom, that people could practice whatever religion they wanted. Now, in the fine print, it did mean that it was for Christians only, but at least it was a law on the books that had to do with providing people with religious freedom. The last colony that we want to discuss is Georgia. Georgia is an interesting colony. It's the very last colony. If you think about where Georgia is, where the state of Georgia is today, and you think about the east coast of the United States, it is in between South Carolina and Florida. And that was really the purpose of the colony at that time, was to kind of provide a space, a buffer zone in between what was then Spanish-controlled Florida and the upper 12 colonies in America, the English colonies, I should say. Georgia was populated with people who were in prison. It was a refuge for people who were in prison for being in debt, owing the king money, or even people who were being persecuted in England that were thrown in jail because of their religious beliefs. They sent them here to America to give them a second start and to kind of provide that wall of space in between Spanish Florida and the upper 12 colonies. Hopefully this video helps you to prepare for the exam.